had a shower and went to bed. I woke up and there was a boom, boom, boom going on. And I raised up and looked out the windows we had in the wheelhouse. And I saw planes flying all around. And then the one plane crashed into the Fort Island buildings. And I said, what the hell are these guys doing, blacking out and diving? And then one plane came across from the Liberty area in the Navy Yard, and he dropped something in the water, and I saw it was torpedoes, and then he banked out of the drive, and I saw the chap signals, red balls, and I said, son of a damn Japs are here. My dad was a coal miner and farmer in a town called Paintsville, Kentucky. And I learned both from him. I didn't do any coal mining. I delivered a daily paper, Ashland Daily from Ashland, Kentucky. It's a big mining camp. Loretta Lynn, one of the movie stars and singers of Nashville. She lived in a coal mine about 10 miles from where I did, but I'm older than she is. We had to pay tuition to go to high school. I got mine through playing football. I lived a very good life in my younger days. I had 5 in my family, older brother and 3 older sisters. Sisters all married coal miners. My brother was a coal mine foreman. He raised 3 boys. I didn't. My first wife I met in San Francisco from Wisconsin. Small town, good people. Everybody shook hands with each other. We had blacks and whites both. We lived together, worked together, and helped each other. I go in and out of port during the battle times. I had 32 months in the combat area, from Pearl Harbor to Palau, through the Solomons and through the Central Pacific. That's where my activity was during the war. I lived very well. I got even with a Jeff from wicking me up in Pearl Harbor. By the time I was a little boy, I wanted to be a sailor. And I used to climb the hill and scare my mother half to death watching on the other side. And my dad says, well, the first 4 will be here to be family, but this one wants to see what's on the other side of the hill. And I sometimes even feel like I've been reincarnated because I hate navigation.
Stan first enlisted for the Navy in 1940.
1940. I didn't have a draft, and you didn't have to sign up till after September of 40. You had to sign up. I was already in the Navy then.
Not every soldier was lucky enough to willingly enlist into the service. After Germany invaded France in 1940, Congress authorized the first peacetime draft in American history. September 16, 1940, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Selective Service Act, an act that required all male citizens between the ages of 26 and 35 to register for the military draft. Although at this point America was not yet involved in the Second World War, Roosevelt considered training American men for military service as an important step for the nation in case the United States would have to defend itself against the growing threat of fascist and militarist regimes in Europe and Japan, which soon came. Men between the ages of 21 and 36 quickly began to register. Draft numbers were drawn from a glass bowl, and President Roosevelt read them aloud for public announcement.
I had some very good friends. A couple of them talked to go in the Navy with me after we got out of high school. No, they wanted to go in the Army. It was scared of high water. And they both got killed going into Italy. And family suffered pretty good with it, but they were real nice people. More like friends, they were almost like brothers. We helped each other and got along together. fiddles and guitars and banjos were pretty loud on weekends, summertime. And I like farming very much, and I still have a very good garden. I can't get the dirt out of my hands. I went to mortuary college in San Francisco because they had business, commercial law, and economics. And that's the three things I need to be a merchant. I didn't want to bury. I wanted my people smiling, so I didn't stay in the mortuary business. But I got through that in a little less than 2 years. And I thought at 29 I came out of the Navy, I didn't have time to go to 4 years colleges. And that had in a little less than 2 years, so I got that.
For Stan Van Hoose, boot camp and basic training took place in North Virginia.
They didn't have schools in the Great Lakes at that time, and they expected me to go to school. And when the boot camp was over with, I said, hell, I joined the Navy to go to sea. I know if I go to school, I could have stayed home. So they said, okay, go to sea. So I went to sea and got aboard the Maryland first ship. Well, first went into the deckhand, then I got into the quartermaster division, in division of navigation. And that's where I made most of my Navy career. I switched over to the navigation department about 6 months aboard the ship. And I was learning to be a quartermaster, which is navigation in the Navy. It's not supplies. And I really enjoyed that. We were helmsmen, we steer the ships and we navigate the ships and all the whole bit. And you always know what's going on, port to port, and long before anybody else does. It was a very interesting division, and I'm glad I got in it. Between watches, if you didn't have, everybody had chores to do. At sea, it was more active than it was in port. But we had free time to lay down and sleep and all this stuff. It's just like any other job. You have so much to do, you do it, you sit down and do whatever else you want to do. We played a lot of cribbage, a little poker, AC-doocy and all this stuff.
Aboard ship, naval men did not just spend all of their free time relaxing and playing games. Each member of the crew had numerous jobs and chores that were completed each day that fit their role. One role, the quartermaster, was an assistant to the officers and navigators on deck. They performed ship control, navigation, and bridge watch duties. Quartermasters conducted weather observations, kept logs and records as they determined their ship's position by visual and electronic means, and they computed the times of sunrise and sunset. One of the most important duties of the quartermaster is maintaining navigational instruments and keeping correct navigational time.
It's just a very interesting division to be into. As a quartermaster, when you become chief of any division aboard ship, that's your department. You're not responsible for the whole ship. Everything I could learn, I got promoted pretty fast. I was lucky on that part. The survey ship, I learned more navigation there than I got years later. And I'm glad I did, and I was in Pearl Harbor when they hit it.
On the morning of December 7, 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor began. At 6:00 a.m., the Japanese aircraft carriers began launching their planes. In total, 183 Japanese aircraft took to the air as part of the first wave of the attack of Pearl Harbor. Sunday mornings were a time of leisure for many U.S. military personnel. Many were either still asleep, in mess halls eating breakfast, or getting ready for church on the morning of December 7, 1941. They were completely unaware that an attack was in the midst. The first wave of Japanese planes reached the U.S. Naval Station at Pearl Harbor at 7:55 a.m. Then the explosion started. The loud booms, pillars of smoke, and low-flying enemy aircraft shocked many into the realization that this was not a training experience. Pearl Harbor was really under attack. Japanese planes filled the sky over Pearl Harbor. Bombs and bullets rained onto the vessels moored below. Despite the surprise, many acted quickly. Within 5 minutes of the beginning of the attack, several gunners had reached their anti-aircraft guns and were trying to shoot down the Japanese planes.
I woke up in I came back aboard ship from Liberty about 1:30 in the morning. I had to always catch the last boat from the dock because I was only a third-class petty officer, so our Liberty was up at 1 o'clock. So if you caught the last boat from 1 o'clock, well, you still wasn't overly. So I went to bed, and one of my buddies that was on the watch when I came aboard, he says, "I got your cot all fixed up for you in the wheelhouse." And that was my cleaning station. After I had a shower and went to bed, I woke up and I heard some boom, boom, boom going on. And I raised up and looked out the windows we had in the wheelhouse. And I saw planes flying all around, and then the one plane crashed into the Fort Island buildings. And I said, "What the hell are you guys doing, blacking out and diving?" And then one plane came across from the Liberty area in the Navy Yard, and he dropped something in the water, and I saw it was torpedoes, and then he banked out of the drive, and I saw the Jap signals, red balls, and I said, "Son of a damn Japs are here." And so I went down to my battle station, which was manning earphones for the doctor, for the navigator. And so I got to watch what was going on, the whole deal. And when I saw the Oklahoma turn over alongside of us, when you see pictures of Pearl Harbor, you see the Oklahoma bottomed up. She was tied up to our port side. She saved us from getting torpedoes.
There were 8 U.S. battleships at Pearl Harbor, 7 of which were lined up at what was called Battleship Row, and 1 was in dry dock for repairs. Since the Japanese attack was a total surprise, many of the first torpedoes and bombs dropped on the unsuspecting ships hit their targets. The damage done was severe. Although the crews on board each battleship worked feverishly to keep their ship afloat, some were destined to sink. At 8:10, a 1,800-pound bomb smashed through the deck of battleship USS Arizona and landed in her forward ammunition magazine. The ship exploded and sank with more than 1,000 men trapped inside. Next, torpedoes pierced the shell of the battleship USS Oklahoma. With 400 sailors aboard, the Oklahoma lost her balance and rolled onto her side and slipped underwater. By the time the attack was over, every battleship in Pearl Harbor, the USS Arizona, Oklahoma, California, West Virginia, Utah, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Nevada, has sustained significant damage.
Our sister ship was behind her, West Virginia, and she was tied up to the Tennessee, which was tied up to the dock behind us. And the Arizona was behind the Tennessee. So as the navigator and I was walking around the conning tower and below the wheelhouse, all of a sudden we saw a big flame would go up and smoke, and he says, "By God," he said, "they got the Arizona." West Virginia was getting either 5 or 7 torpedoes, but they kept counter-flooding her and kept her from turning over. She was our sister ship. We were the Colorado to West Virginia to Maryland were the first 16-inch gun battleships. The Tennessee and the California had the same hull we did, but they had 12 of the 14-inch guns. But 5 of us traveled together sometimes on our exercises. So as it lulled between the 2 raids, the Nevada, on the second raid, Nevada started leaving the port. As she passed us, they started giving her torpedoes and bombs. So I was just standing by in the wheelhouse, and also if something happened underway and the quartermaster on the duty, that his job was something happened to him and he couldn't do it, but I would fill in for him. And the quartermaster first class in charge of the bridge area come up and he says, one of the guys was sick down in Central Station. That was the next place. If something happened to the captain, top crew, they had another battle station. He says, "You go down and man the phones for him?" And I said, "Sure." So we're not going to get underway anyway, so I went down, and the rest of the battle I was down there for about a half an hour.
By 9:45 a.m., just less than 2 hours after the attack had begun, the Japanese planes left Pearl Harbor and headed back to their aircraft carriers. The attack on Pearl Harbor was over. Radios buzzed with the news that several hundred Japanese planes attacked a U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, killing more than 2,400 Americans, as well as damaging or destroying 8 Navy battleships and more than 100 planes. The distant war in Europe was now a central part of life in the United States, affecting politics, businesses, media, and entertainment. At 12:30 p.m. on the day following the attack on Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt addressed to Congress the declaration of war on Japan. Congress declared war, officially bringing the United States into World War II.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Despite all of the damage, the Japanese had failed to cripple the Pacific Fleet. Since the 1940s, battleships were no longer the most important naval vessel. Aircraft carriers were, and as it happened, all of the Pacific Fleet's carriers were away from the base on December 7th. Moreover, the Pearl Harbor assault had left the base's most vital onshore facilities, oil storage deposits, repair shops, shipyards, and submarine docks intact, allowing the U.S. Navy able to rebound relatively quickly from the attack.
And then when the planes quit coming, why, they secured from general quarters, just went on standby in case it started again. And then we got to go to top side and see what funny stuff happening. It looked like a part of what hell could be, because it was water and there was a fire in the water from the oil. Boats going in all directions trying to help somebody, and some people that had jumped overboard and tried to make it to the shore before they drowned.
The ship that Stan was on during the Pearl Harbor attack was the USS Maryland. As a part of Battleship Row, the Maryland was directly hit by 2 bombs. The hits caused relatively light damage and flooding forward. Unfortunately, 4 sailors of the Maryland lost their lives that December morning.
We didn't have too much damage on the Maryland. We lost 4 or 5 men at Pearl Harbor. We had maybe about 12 or 15 that did a little time in the sick bay afterwards. But what we lost people from was strafing. When planes go by and strafe. And the next morning, I had to put up the flag next morning. As I tied it on the post, I looked up to the Lord sky and I said, God, I know you're up there. I haven't taken time to give you any service, but you get me through this war, I'll find a way to serve you. And that's the way it went, all through the whole war.
The day after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, some sailors went on shore during Liberty to see the damage. Liberty is a short absence from naval duty.
Being ashore is called Liberty. And you've seen so much. Everybody had binoculars, and I was lucky. On the bridge, I had telescopes and stuff that were real powerful. Sometimes we'd invite guys up to look through them. On our quartermaster deal, I just had to do what I had to do was clean up our area. The wheelhouse was mine. The conning tower, one level below the wheelhouse, was about 16 inches thick. Had little slits in it around the officers could look through, because you want to keep your captain and your control in a safe place as possible. Otherwise, they're up on the bridge, what we call it, and that's where the normal command the ship from. The Pearl Harbor, the battleships operating out of Pearl Harbor, all of us were. We were doing all kinds of play war deals, and you was learning to be whatever you were assigned to. We was also recording all the activities on the ship. And then when our watch was over in 4 hours, or 2 hours, or whatever they had it doing, then the officer of the deck wrote out his log. We kept him informed of what was going on the ship. We had to, during the night, we'd make trips to them. We had a Marine on the bow and a Marine on the stern during the night. And we associated through them and reported to the officer of the deck. We took care of the winter callings. That was in our division. We got out of there in about 2 weeks. We had 2 bomb hits. We only lost a very few men. But they pulled us out of there and put a temporary patch on the sides where the bombs went off. They were dropped from high levels, but they were magnetic. And when they hit the water, they headed into us. We had 2 of them on the port side of the ship, the left side of the ship, but it did very little damage. And the Tennessee and Maryland went back to Birmingham, Washington. Pennsylvania came out of the dry dock, and she followed us over part of the way, and then she went into San Francisco. We was in Birmingham Navy Yard for about 2 months, and they got us all patched up, and we went through some exercises at sea, and all ready to go. We went back to San Francisco. We based out of there for about 2 months. Then we went south when they had a battle in the South Pacific.
After the Japanese bombed Hawaii's Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, American men of all ages flocked to recruitment centers to enlist in the military and fight for their country, but it was not enough. By November of 1942, the United States was now a participant in the war, and draft ages were expanded. Men ages 18 through 37 were now required to register for enlistment, and the rest of the country put forth the war effort. Factories began war production, and families rationed. The home front ensured that production flowed from the country to the battlefields. Forces were supplied with uniforms, guns, tanks, ships, warplanes, and all other supplies needed to fight the war. Jobs opened up for women in factories as men went into the service. Even children were part of the home front as they collected scrap metal and delivered messages. During World War II, there were approximately 16 million active duty soldiers. Unfortunately, more than 400,000 United States soldiers were killed in war. Families suffered the loss of their loved ones. Soldiers were missing in action, lost at sea, interred as unknowns, and lost their lives battling for America's freedom, leaving behind friends and family members grieving their loss.
Before they went into Guadalcanal, and they lost to Lexington down there. We didn't get into that battle. We were standing by for help because we weren't fast enough to move around like the aircraft carriers were doing. And then when they pulled back in after the Midway battle, we were standing by on that one too.
The Battle of Midway was a 4-day battle that took place June 4th through June 7th of 1942. The battle was fought near the tiny U.S. Mid-Pacific base at Midway Atoll. Prior to Midway, Japan possessed general naval superiority over the United States. After Midway, the two naval fleets were essentially equals, and the United States soon took the offensive.
After the Midway battle, we got back into port in San Francisco, and they had a bulletin board. I volunteered for a survey ship, and that's where I learned my navigation, really. It says 75-25, you can't qualify. 75-25, you can't graduate. 75-25, you might not live, but we'll pay you double. And I volunteered for that. The chief that I worked for, he said, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "If I'm going to die, it don't make any difference what I'm going to die, as long as I get a job done." And I says, "I've always been told I was the meanest SOB in the fleet, and when I grew up in Kentucky, so I says, maybe I'll live a little longer." And I did. But I think that made the Japs pay for my next 2 years. I snuck into situations. Then after they stopped us from doing that, we had 8 first-class quartermasters aboard the Pathfinder, the survey ship, and we had to draw straws for who went out each time they called for one of the transport. They only allowed 2 first-class quartermasters on the ship. And we were 8. And so the 3 guys that did the visiting away from the ship, because the other guys had families, we talked to the skipper and our chief to let us go first. And, so we snuck in, we all survived, and they said they had aircraft, in the aircraft planes, they had cameras that could get what they needed. Sometimes they didn't do that, but I was already transferred off when I got back to the States, and the next 2 ships I was on a transport from Tarawa to Palau across the Central Pacific. And Palau was the last invasion while they were working on the Philippines. I ended up being a navigator because of my training on that survey ship. It was a good job, and it was a good training job for my training for it. It was the beginning of the first SEALs. We got some of their training for about 3 months before we went aboard on the survey job. And in '43, I was back in the States, and the gal I met before I went aboard this survey ship, I started dancing with, and she's a waitress. She's transferred from Milwaukee to California, West Coast, to train waitresses. And I danced with her for we had open gangway, so we went to shore every night. And I danced with her every night. And after a couple of weeks, she says, "By the way, what kind of a church you go to?" I said, "I don't. I only go for social reasons. But I made a deal with the Almighty. If he got me through a war, I'd find a way to serve them. And since my world history teacher was such a witch, and she'd done the Catholic Church so much, I said, I'm going to look into that one first. I said, what are you? And she said, I'm a Catholic.
Throughout the rest of the war, Stan Van Hoose continued to write to his wife whenever it was possible. Although they were lucky enough to communicate during wartime, military men could not reveal their location through writing in case of mail getting captured by the enemy. Some men performed many secret missions during their time in service.
My wife was still, my girlfriend was still waiting, and I had been sending her money, and she had her own tip money. We had about $15,000 saved up. And we got married, and I went right back to sea 6 days later on my way to Tarawa.
Tarawa is an atoll located approximately 2,500 miles southwest of Hawaii. On an island off of Tarawa, the Japanese built an airstrip defended by 4,700 troops dug into a labyrinth of pillboxes and bunkers interconnected by tunnels and defended by wire and mines. The task of dislodging this force fell to the Marines of the 2nd Division. After a 76-hour battle from November 20th to November 23rd, 1943, the Marines held the island. The United States sought the island because of its strategic location that was centrally located in the Pacific for the Philippine Islands. The Battle of Tarawa was one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. U.S. destroyers and battleships staged a heavy assault on the island. As the battle progressed, U.S. landing craft moved in on the island but got stuck on a reef because of the low tide. As the 800 Marines attempted to breach the island, they had to fight their way through razor-sharp coral. As a result, only 450 made it to shore, but still managed to win the battle and take over the islands.
The Marines were, and about 2 days before we took in most of our cargo, men on the invasions were about 2 to 3 days from the initial landing, and they built airstrips. And so we had tailed into each battle, five invasions we had. The wars not, the battles are not pretty, but they weren't as bad as you get when you're landing as a troop. We pulled the Marines off the Tarawa, some of them. It was 5 transport ships. We brought in the people going to build airstrips, but the Marines, when they got relieved with the soldiers, we took them back to a place for their rest and recuperation for another invasion. They would march aboard that ship out from the boats like they was on parade. They got up to the bow of the ship and they just fell over. Their eyes were back in their head about half an inch, it seemed like. And they were tired. And one guy says, hey, you can't sleep there. And the lieutenant that was watching them, Marine, he says, he's tired, he wants to sleep. And that was it. And when they come to, I showered, shaved, and ate. And one of them was all shipmate of mine on the Maryland before he switched over to the land stuff. He got transferred after I did from the Maryland, and he was already now a lieutenant. I was watching him play poker down below from the bridge. And he put somebody else's glasses and looked up and hollered, hey, you son of a bitch, what are you doing up there? Come on up, you jackass. And he's like a brother, because he was on the fighting team when before the war started. And he was a corporal last time I saw him aboard the Maryland. There he is now, a lieutenant. I said, how come you got all that gold stuff? He said, oh, hell, they stuck it on me, I had to wear it. Marines are, to me, get the top training and gutsier than any military people I've known. I've got about 4 or 5 friends in Beloit that are in World War II Marines, and they're not as healthy as I am, but we're very close.
Through their travels, men encountered new people every day. Veterans made many friends and brotherhoods that have impacted the rest of their lives. Many young Americans of all backgrounds enlisted in the military during war times, one of which was Lieutenant John Kennedy. Kennedy and his crew participated in early campaigns in the Allies' long struggle to roll back the Japanese from their conquests throughout the island chains of the Pacific Ocean. The role of the small but fast PT boats was to attack the Japanese shipping known as the Toki Express that supplied Japanese troops in the islands and to support the U.S. Army and Marine Corps attacking the Japanese on shore.
In fact, one time, one of the jobs we was out doing, President Kennedy was called a rich boy from Massachusetts. I never heard any other name until he ran for president. And that was a sneaky job we were doing. He was steering the boat because he had one of the bigger PT boats with two torpedoes on each side. And he sure knew how to handle that damn thing. But when he wanted to watch this plane, he couldn't watch the steering and the plane both, and he saw we were quartermasters, and that's our first job, being an expert helmsman before he even put third class. So he looked around and saw the wheel on my arm, on my shirt. He said, "Hey, wheels, grab the wheel for me." And so he told me what to do, and he watched this patrol plane Japs had. This island, we went into the survey, no, the Japs weren't on it. We had 21 men on it, up on the top of the same thing, and then they were watching about 20 miles down the ocean, where you could see mountains and stuff, where we were going to invasion next. We had 21 soldiers. Every week they bring 7 in, take 7 back. And those guys had to put up that damn island for the whole 3 weeks. About every 10, 15 minutes, it felt like somebody grabbed a hold of the island on the bottom and shake it like this, because it's coming up out of the water. And the whole damn Solomon Islands are like that. The smaller islands, you feel it more than you do on the bigger ones.
Although Stan was a part of many operations, missions, and battles, he enjoyed some more than others.
The one I enjoyed most was the Battle of Saipan.
Having captured Guadalcanal and the Solomons, Tarawa and the Gilberts, and Kwajalein and the Marshalls, American forces continued their island-hopping campaign across the Pacific by planning attacks in the Marianas Islands for mid-1944. The Battle of Saipan was a battle of the Pacific campaign of World War II, fought on the island of Saipan in the Mariana Islands, June 15th to July 9th of 1944. Saipan had been occupied by the Japanese since World War I and held strategic importance for both the United States and Japan. As it was part of the Mariana Islands, its capture would allow Americans to build runways big enough for its B-29 Super Fortress bombers to reach mainland Japan and return to their base in Saipan. It also meant that any Japanese forces south of Saipan were cut off from the Japanese mainland itself. The amphibious landing on the island was preceded by an intense 2-day bombardment carried out by the U.S. Navy on the 13th of June, 1944. The battle had 15 battleships with 165,000 shells being fired. After landing on June 15th, the Marines met with fierce Japanese resistance. The Japanese had cleverly marked the bay with flags to demarcate the shooting range. That allowed them to destroy almost 20 amphibious tanks. They also installed barbed wire, machine gun emplacements, and trenches. This greatly increased American casualties. Despite the casualties, the Marines had taken the beachhead by nightfall. The Japanese responded by counterattacking at night, which resulted in them losing many men. Once the island was secured, Seabees started to construct runways that could be used by B-29s. No Japanese position was safe from heavy bombing once these runways were completed.
My old battleship, 5 battleships, older ones, come through, and it was about the third day of the battle. It was a little town, probably 15 to 20,000 people, up the coast about 5 miles. I had an 85 power scope, and it just looked like you're looking across the street with your eyeballs or a small pair of binoculars. But those 5 battleships went by this town, about 5 or 10 miles down the coast, and they stopped. And Maryland opened fire first. And I watched that for about 4 or 5 minutes, and I put the big scope on them just ahead of the smoke. And I picked up the projectile, take it right into the buildings. And boy, they disappeared. The whole damn town was gone in about half an hour's time. 1st of June in 1944, when the invasion of Saipan, I was also Chief Quartermaster. And the little anchor you see on my cap that I wear from Maryland, it still shines like it was brand new. The Chief Quartermaster, the captain, and I were pretty good buddies. I kept him informed about his navigation, and the officer he had assigned the navigation didn't know what he was doing. I could tell the captain, and we worked together. In 1944, they tried to make me an officer. I said, oh no. I didn't want that part. So after I got married, and I'd been out there for most of the war, I wrote my dad in November of 44. At least my folks got letters from me when we hit port that I was alive. I was still in all one piece. And these legs of mine are 92 years old, but they're still good. And I got back to the States in March of 45, and Lieutenant told me that at the Treasure Island receiving station that I was going to be ordered to go to shore duty. I says, I'm too young to go to shore duty, and I says, you don't have a job shore duty that fits under the quartermaster. He says, well, you're going to get vetted because we have orders to send you to shore duty. You had 32 months, that's enough. So they gave me a job dispatching tugboats at Mare Island Navy Yard, 24 on and 48 off. And I was there till I re-enlisted again in 46. And then I went aboard a big tanker. And aboard there, we took a load of oil out from San Francisco to Pearl Harbor.
As the first B-29 bombing runs began in October 1944, there was a problem. Japanese fighters taking off from Iwo Jima were intercepting B-29s, as well as attacking the Mariana airfields. The U.S. determined that Iwo Jima must be captured. February 19, 1945. After months of naval and air bombardment, the U.S. Marines invaded Iwo Jima. Japanese defenders dug themselves deep within volcanic rocks for protection. Approximately 70,000 Marines and 18,000 Japanese took part in the battle. The flag raising atop Mount Suribachi took place on February 23, 1945, 5 days after the battle began. After 36 days of fighting, the island was finally declared secured on March 16, 1945. The Battle of Okinawa, codenamed Operation Iceberg, was fought on the islands of Okinawa. It was the largest amphibious assault in the Pacific theater of World War II. The 82-day-long battle lasted from early April until mid-June of 1945. The United States force for the invasion consisted of nearly 1,500 ships, of which only a fifth were warships. The rest were being used for transport and supplies. On April 1st, the U.S. Marines made their first landing in Okinawa and were surprised to encounter only light resistance from the Japanese. By nightfall, the bay had seen 60,000 military personnel come ashore. By April 20th, the northern half of Okinawa was effectively secured. The end of the battle resulted in victory for the Allies. Despite the humiliation of having been crushed in the battle at Okinawa, Japan resolved to fight on. August 6, 1945, the United States launched a massive atomic weapon on Hiroshima, Japan. In the early morning, a B-28 bomber named Enola Gay took off from a North Pacific island in the Marianas with a 10-foot atomic bomb nicknamed Little Boy hooked to its ceiling. This atomic bomb, the equivalent of 20,000 tons of TNT, flattened the city of Hiroshima, killing tens of thousands of civilians. While Japan was still trying to comprehend this devastation, 3 days later the United States struck with another atomic bomb, codenamed Fat Man, on Nagasaki.
I was on Liberty and San Francisco from shore duty. And I danced a jig in the apartment. And they got the SOBs. And when I stopped the second one, I jumped again. And then my wife had a sister that was working in the post office. Her boyfriend was a chief petty officer in merchant ships. They had an armed part of it, and he happened to be on Liberty. And so when it said the Japs resigned, quit, the military men had a battle going up and down Market Street, celebrating. So we went down and got a cab, and saw a cab going by, and we hollered at him. He stopped and took us down. And we had him park on this side of Market Street, and he and I went through the crowd to the post office and got Marge and brought her back through. Since I'm right-handed, he was left-handed. We both had good training. She had her arm locked in we only hit one or two guys, and they turned her back to one some other way. We got Marge back to the telephone, back to the cab. We said, we're not going to pay you for the cab ride until we get back. So you give him a nice $10 tip. That was big money for a tip for a cab driver. And so we got her back across there, and then we celebrated that night. In fact, we celebrated for the whole weekend. We didn't get drunk or anything. We danced, lots of dances, and ate good, sung good, enjoyed it. I danced a jig. I was really happy. You know why? Because the 1st of November, '45, we were going to invade Japan. And they were scratched out 1 million men to start with. Now, which is better? They didn't tell us they're coming to Pearl Harbor. What the hell should we tell them they're going to come to Japan? But we saved a lot of men of our country by dropping those 2 bombs. And I give that a joy every time I hear it.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government in reply to the message forwarded to that government by the Secretary of State on August 11th. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan. In the reply, there is no qualification.
On September 2nd, 1945, the Japanese government surrendered unconditionally. Japanese representatives signed the official instrument of surrender prepared by the War Department and approved by President Truman. With Japan's surrender, the Allies saw an end to the Second World War.
Well, I re-enlisted in '46. I went to Kentucky. When I re-enlisted, I had a 45-day re-enlistment. The war was over with it. And because I never intended to go back to live there anyway. I had my eyes on Wisconsin. And when I made sales manager for a company, they transferred me. We had an opening in Madison, and I liked to hunt and fish. And I liked Wisconsin. I liked her family. She lived up in the Montello area. And the rest is history. When I was on shore duty in '46, before I left my island, I was living in San Francisco. Half a block away was a big opera house. They had fancy shows and so forth and plays. And they used that to form the United Nations. And I went over there every time I could get free on my 2 days off.
The United Nations is an international organization founded in 1945. After the war, 51 countries committed to maintaining international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, and promoting social progress, better living standards, and human rights.
I decided that after 8 years in the Navy, I always wanted to be a merchant when I was a young boy or a sailor, so I became both. And I had my own store in Beloit for 40 years, and I managed another company's 2 stores for another 15 years. I retired finally when I was 75 because my first wife was dying of cancer and I wanted to be with her. I really enjoyed the Navy very much. I think it's very educational. I got to navigate 3 oceans and 9 seas before I left. Navy to me was a life people can't even imagine unless they get into it. And I didn't, well, from the time I was young, I wanted to see what's on the other side. And I am still trying to enlist people for the Navy. I tell the kids, little boys, boy, you make a good looking sailor someday. And I tell them why I think you should be a good sailor. But you kids are not going to have what I had of liberty in this country. When you've traveled as many countries as I have, you know there's no place like this place. We can buy what we can afford. We can live where we can afford. We can work where we can compete. No other country has this. And it worries me very much. From a country I've seen a lot of men die for. I got scars on my carcass for your liberty and for mine. And I still think this is the best country in the world to live in. It's worth dying for. It's worth working for. I'm still a sailor at heart. And I think this country is the best country in the world, and no country like it. And I can't tell you what it's like to see countries that don't have what we had. The only way you can tell is to go see them yourself. And I don't think God's going to let that happen. This is the only nation that says one nation under God. And I still think He's in control. Somehow He's going to change it.
Stan's passion for his service to this country rubbed off on me in a way that has altered my life forever. When I first came into this project, I never imagined how committed I would soon become. When I first listened to Stan's raw interview, I didn't think I could do it. I questioned my ability, and I had my doubts. How was I supposed to take this spectacular story and turn it into something amazing, mesmerizing, and something that Stan would be proud of? I listened to his story again, and then again. Stan pulled me into his world. I quickly found myself immersed in his stories and his experiences. Late nights became a routine of research, and on the weekends I watched World War II documentaries. It's quite amazing how attached I became to Stan without ever meeting him. Just through watching his interview, Stan has taught me more history, life lessons and truth than any teacher has ever taught me. In the end, passion, love, and liberty are the important things in life. Thank you, Stan, for being a part of this project and for being a life-changing figure to not only me, but to all who get the pleasure of watching this documentary.